What's going on, guys, and welcome back to WWE Network and Chill, where I, Graham G. Matthews, break down all the original content I watch on the WWE Network. Today we're talking the latest episode of Broken Skull Sessions with none other than Stone Cold Steve Austin and his very special guest on this show, Kane, the Big Red Monster, the mayor of Knoxville, Tennessee, Glenn Jacobs himself, here on the Broken Skull Session show. This was great. I really enjoyed this. The first two episodes were terrific. The first one was with The Undertaker 2 months ago. That premiered right after Survivor Series. And then the Goldberg one premiered right after the TLC pay-per-view last month. This one was also great. I thought they would wait until after the Rumble to premiere it. But I would assume they're going to put up a new episode of 24 instead, focusing on WrestleMania 35. That's usually what they do. They put up the new 30 or the new 24s on the WrestleMania from the year prior, right after the Rumble. So I assume this year is no different. But this was a really good episode. Kane comes across, like Austin said here, as one of the nicest guys you will ever meet. I just bought his book recently. I'm hoping to get around to reading that at some point. I got to meet the guy himself at a meet and greet at the big event in November, and he was really nice then too. Very glad I got to meet him, have him sign my Intercontinental Championship belt. He was actually complimentary of the title, saying, "Oh, there's a lot of signatures on here." But anyway, excuse me, Kane could not come off any cooler in this interview than he did. This was a really good interview. It does clock in at around an hour and 18 minutes. I forgot how long the Goldberg one was. I feel like that one was like 55 minutes to an hour. Not too long. The Taker one was like well over an hour and a half. The Kane one is long too, but for good reason, because obviously they go into great detail about how he broke into the business, his upbringing, a lot of Undertaker talk. I would say the Undertaker takes up about, I don't know, maybe 60-70%, if that, of this conversation. 60-70% of this conversation is all about the Undertaker, which is weird. I mean, obviously they had to talk about it, but like, with the Undertaker interview, because Taker's accomplished and done so much throughout his entire career, that they never even mentioned Kane once in that entire interview that Austin did with Taker 2 months ago. And that shocked the hell out of me. I was very surprised to not hear them touch upon Kane. And hey, maybe that was done by design because they knew they were going to talk to Kane, excuse me, for this episode, and they didn't want to repeat material or repeat anything or, cover anything twice, whatever. If that was the case, then I get it. But it was a little weird, like I said in that review 2 months ago, for them to completely ignore that chapter. Not even chapter, his entire involvement, Kane's entire involvement in Taker's career, which is massive. I mean, it wasn't just that one feud, like, that one feud in 97, 98. No, these guys had their careers intertwined at countless turns between the late 90s, early 2000s, mid 2000s, late 2000s, early 2010s, throughout the 2010s. These guys' careers will forever be synonymous with each other. So I was very happy to see a lot of Taker talk on this episode when we didn't get it in the Taker podcast. But anyway, we'll start from the top here and work our way down from beginning to end. So we kick off the podcast with Stone Cold asking Kane, after reading his book recently, what it's been like to be the mayor of Knoxville, Tennessee, and what kind of really got you into politics. And Kane says, "I just wanted to make a positive impact on the community as a mayor." And Austin said that he enjoyed his book. They did a little cheap plugs in the beginning, and I got to get the book plug out there. The book just came out a couple months ago. Again, hoping to get it, or rather hoping to read it. I bought a copy a couple of weeks ago. I'm hoping to go read it at some point. But anyway, they talk about his book, and I was very surprised that there was not more politics talk than there was. There's so much on this episode that they didn't even cover, didn't get to, because Kane's career is so long, and he's done so much. And again, I'll get to that at the end too. But they don't talk anything about politics. From what he just said here about him, I want to make a positive impact on the community. That was it. That was the only thing he said about politics, aside from saying that his definition of the American dream is creating the life that you want to create. He also talks about how he was raised and not giving up when things got rough. That's kind of something his parents implemented in him growing up. Stone Cold brings up how he got into wrestling. So Kane recalls that story, saying that he grew up a wrestling fan in St. Louis. That's kind of around the area where he grew up. He went to a lot of shows. He recalls meeting people and seeing them in person. He didn't start watching the NWA and WWF until after they got cable. And then after trying the football thing, which he would have been a natural at. I mean, Kane's very athletic. He's a huge dude, so the football thing kind of seemed academic. But his knee got blown out, so his football career was basically over. And if this sounds familiar, it's because Kane has already talked about this in one of two places. One, either on Photo Shoot, because he's appeared on Photo Shoot in the last couple months, and Untold. The Untold on Kane was tremendous. He was technically in two because they did one on the Team Hell No tag team like back in August. But the one they did on Kane's career in September or October was absolutely amazing. I think it was around September, if I'm not mistaken. But anyway, so we talked about that here as well, saying that his football days were over, and he thought he would give wrestling a try. So he remembers seeing Hulk Hogan in person, seeing him make his entrance, and just being blown away by the crowd reaction and just the fact that he came across like a fucking superstar, and he's like, wow, I need to do this. Like, this is something I really want to be a part of. So we wanted to get formally trained, so we found Jerry Jarrett over in Nashville and trained with him in the USWA, which is where he got his start. So we moved from the St. Louis area to the Nashville area to work for the USWA, to work for Jerry Jarrett. I thought he said Jeff Jarrett for a second, which would have made no sense. Obviously, Jeff Jarrett is probably younger, if not around the same age. And no, actually, he's older than Kane is, so that would not have made any sense. I thought he was talking about TNA for a second. Obviously, no, that's not what he was talking about, but I'm just so used to hearing Jeff Jarrett, that's what I thought of initially. But anyway, he said that you don't really learn until you get in front of people. He said he learned a lot from the Malenkos, wrestling at their school, their training school, Dean Malenko, Boris Malenko, that whole great family of wrestlers. They then transitioned into Kane's career in Puerto Rico as part of the WWC, excuse me. I'm so used to saying WWE. That's obviously promoted by Carlos Colon, the infamous WWE Hall of Famer. But, the father of Carlito and Primo and the uncle of Epico. He runs the World Wrestling Council over in Puerto Rico, and that's where Kane kind of got his start after training in the USWA. And he really started to find his footing as a performer at that point. He shares a story about Dutch Mantell, a.k.a. Zeb Coulter, and the heat they got for one segment they did. He saw just the shit getting kicked out of Zeb Coulter, out of Dutch Mantell in front of the audience, and he had to pull the security guard back into the backstage area because everyone was getting hostile. It was a nasty scene. He called it a hairy night. That's what he said. It was a very hairy night. And he said that happened quite a bit in that promotion just because of the way that the crowds were. That was the culture back then, where if you had a great heel and you did a great heel segment, the crowd would literally riot. Like, people say that now, if so-and-so doesn't win, we riot. No one will do the type of shit that was being done back then. Maybe it's still going on, I doubt it, but this is the late 90s. This is the mid-90s. That's the way that shit was done in wrestling back then. Anyway, so from there he started working with Jim Cornette in Smoky Mountain Wrestling as Unabomber, not Unabomber. They made a point to mention that it wasn't his name was not Unabomber. They called him Unabomb. Why? I have no idea. Kane said he called him Unabomb, or Jim Cornette called Kane Unabomb because he thought it was a cool name. I guess, but that would never fly today. Not in a million years would that ever fly in 2020. But we actually see footage of Kane facing The Undertaker, not from their feud in 97, 98, and beyond, but rather in 1995. I'm sure you've seen clips of it or a picture of it or footage of it before. It's probably on YouTube, but it was from 1995. Of course, Taker was already the self-made superstar that he was from his work in WWE. He debuted there in 1990. By this point, he was already 5 years in, multi-time world champion. So this was hardly, it wasn't like Kane and Taker were working with each other before Kane got into WWE. This was while Kane was still pre-WWE. He was still trying to find his footing as a performer, like I said, but Taker was already established. I forget off the top of my head, but they must have had some sort of working relationship between the WWE and Smoky Mountain Wrestling, with Cornette being in WWE at that time. I guess it was kind of their version of developmental, for lack of a better word. So they brought in Taker to work with Kane, and as these two fucking monsters, they just worked great, and Austin called it a great, great match. Kane says that Taker was always good to him, and again, this is where they kind of transition into all the Undertaker talk and how he got started in WWE. So from there, Kane had a meeting with Vince McMahon. He got called in, flew into New York, got flown into New York to have a meeting with Vince about coming in to the WWE. This was his dream. This was his goal. He was freaking out about this. He was so happy. Until Vince says, have you ever had a bad dentist? Or something along those lines where he's like, yeah, like, we want to make this a character, and I think he'd be a good fit for it. I mean, that's a terrible Vince impersonation. I could probably do a better one, but I won't. And Kane's like, oh no. Like, he knew of everything that Vince was all about. He had heard all about the rumors, heard all the rumors about how manipulative, Vince could be and how he really wanted to trick you into doing what he wanted you to do. And Kane is coming up with all these answers in his head to how to answer this guy, for how to answer to Vince, to how to respond to Vince, because this is such a bizarre question. And then he comes to find out what Vince is referring to, like I said, is that Vince wanted him to do that dentist gimmick. And he's like, oh no. Literally within the span of maybe a half an hour to an hour, if not a day, Kane went from being so happy to being so distraught because he didn't know what to do. He didn't know how to make it work. It was a fucking dentist. It was a dentist idea. And the funny thing is, we don't have Vince to blame for this. We've heard a lot of stories. I've heard interviews with Shane Douglas, which is where, Vince was actually the person that came up with the Dean Douglas persona because people hate teachers and shit like that. Like the IRS character, I'm sure that was a glorified Vince McMahon idea because everyone hates tax collectors. So, well, of course, people are going to boo IRS. Of course, he's going to be a great wrestling heel because people hate their tax collectors, so they'll hate IRS. It was a dumb gimmick. I mean, obviously, all these people made their respective characters work, but not because of Vince McMahon. And this was not one of his genius moments, as Kane would bring on, we'll talk about later on, that he would have this genius moment. The guy's a genius. He's a mastermind. Now, this was just a dumb-ass gimmick. But like I said, we may not have Vince to blame here. Vince may not be the one to blame in this situation, because Kane brings up that although Vince loved the idea, it was actually Bobby Heenan's idea before Vince, and he had wanted to do that character for years, and he thought Kane was the perfect person to portray that character. So we actually have Bobby Heenan to blame, because I don't know when Bobby Heenan left WWE. Would that have been 93, 94? I remember that segment where he got booted out of the company and never came back for years and years and years. He went over to WCW. So if that was his idea, and Vince loved the idea from when he heard it from Bobby, that must have been years earlier, like in 92, 93 at the latest, if not earlier than that. So he had been hanging his hat on this idea for a long fucking time, and he was finally going to have it delivered in the form of Kane. So again, they talk about that. He said, that gimmick, Kane says, really took the wind out of my sails because Vince was so invested in it, but Kane did not know how to make it work. Stone Cold brings up an incident in Kuwait, which I had no idea about. Maybe you guys do. I've never heard about this, and maybe I haven't. I just forgot. I definitely have not seen footage of this. So they show footage of an interview that Taker and Vader did back in 97, April, I believe, of 1997. They were doing a promotional interview for that night's match, or for that night's show, or for the next night's show, whatever, in fucking Kuwait. The interviewer, I mean, obviously it's not his fault. We've seen shit like this before. Like Colin, I think it may have been Colin Cowherd, if not someone else. No, it wasn't Colin Cowherd. It was definitely someone else. That Vince fucking went off in his face because this guy asked a question that was like a legitimate question, and Vince went off on the guy. Maybe it was Michael something. I don't remember who it was. And maybe it was just a no-namer. But this was kind of similar to that, where the interviewer asked about this conception, or this misconception, whatever, that wrestling was fake, if they could expand upon it, whatever. Taker took it in pride. He took it in full stride here and said, listen, you guys could never do what we do. I mean, there's a lot of dumb opinions out there. It's a very, unoriginal question. What a dumb thing to ask, blah, blah, blah. He never gets hot. He's very honest. He's very blunt. But he gets straight to the point, and that's it. Vader even says, he goes, ask me that same question, dude. And then he does. And then he goes, the footage is on YouTube. They show it here on the special. But I know this is kind of irrelevant to the Kane thing, but they showed the footage of what happened. I was shocked they showed it. Maybe just to give context. But Vader goes, listen, I'm not as cordial as my friend here. I'm not as cordial. I'm not as diplomatic as The Undertaker is. I'm going to beat the shit out of you. Like, I could beat the shit out of you if I wanted to. We put our bodies on the line, just going off on a tangent about how it's so disrespectful. It was so offensive for this interviewer to ask them about how wrestling is fake. And then he gets in the interviewer's face, he yells at him, is this fucking fake? Does this fucking feel fake to you? And he shakes him, he messes up his tie, flips over the table. If fucking Vader did that to me, I would shit my pants. I would cower and die right there, and I'd fucking crawl up in a ball and just die right there. This guy looked like he was about to cry. It was funny. It was very unprofessional, but it was funny at the same time. I guess really not much came out of it, except for the fact, so the reason I bring this up and the reason why they talk about this is because I guess the original plan back in 97 after Taker won the WWE Championship from, was it Psycho Sid? Was it Psycho Sid at WrestleMania 13? I honestly don't even remember at this point. Yeah, it was Psycho Sid that he beat for the WWE title. The match was whatever, but okay. So they move on. They were supposed to do Taker and Vader, who had just... now, Vader wasn't fresh in the WWE. He debuted in 96. But it made sense as a feud to do over the championship. And they did end up doing it at the In Your House Canadian Stampede pay-per-view in July, which honestly was an amazing match. I think it was very short, but from what I can recall about the match, and that pay-per-view is amazing. I can't really say that about many pay-per-views I've gone back and watched that I wasn't a fan for, but that Canadian Stampede show is fucking something else. That's one of the greatest pay-per-views they've ever done. But anyway, they had a match in that show. Other than that, they never really explored that feud to its fullest because Vader got in trouble, I guess, and they wanted someone else for that spot. So going back to my original point here with Kane, they were going to slot him where Vader was before the whole incident happened. So Taker needed an opponent. Kane took a spot. And before that, I don't know if it was around that time or they were doing the fake Diesel thing maybe in late 96 or early 97. But Kane, after the Isaac Yankem character died a death, they made him fake Diesel, which Austin says it was what it was, which is the perfect way to sum it up. And then Kane said he's kind of a bit more complimentary of the character. I mean, it was a dumb idea, obviously, but in terms of his portrayal of the character, he said that it was another step in the right direction. It helped him get his confidence back after the Isaac Yankem thing. He didn't know what to do, and he got to kind of work his matches. He got to face fucking Bret Hart at SummerSlam in 1995 or whatever it was. So being the fake Diesel character really proved that he can make anything he was involved in work. And Vince wanted Kane to be more than a one-off opponent for Taker, so they pitched Kane as a rival for Taker. And Vince is like, I like the idea, but I want to make it more than just a one-off feud. I want to make this into a real story. And that was when they developed the whole, half-brother thing, got burned, come back, all that other stuff. So he talks about how Vince had said, listen, if you have any other ideas for this Kane character, dude, just pitch me. Which he does. Kane talks to Vince and says, I don't really like this, I don't really like that, we could do this instead. I forgot exactly what he said. But he wasn't a big fan of the cape and shit like that. Vince explained it, and Kane talked about this in the Untold thing, I think, when he was, recalling his debut on that episode, which was an amazing piece of business. If you've never seen it, definitely check it out. But he kind of retells the story here about how Vince convinced them that the cape was a good idea. And honestly, did it look a little silly? Yeah, it was cool to some people. Some people thought it was dumb. Everyone has a different opinion on the Kane cape. But Vince explained it perfectly. He was like, in Kane's mind, in the character Kane's mind, he's a good guy. He's not evil, he's cool. By wearing this cape, it's kind of making up for all the other mental scars that he has going on, all the other issues. It's kind of a compensation for all the other problems he has going on right now. And Kane was like, that's brilliant. And it makes honestly perfect sense. And he loved it. That was like the first time he had seen Vince be the brilliant mind that he's known for being. Maybe not nowadays, back then probably. But he was like, wow, this guy's a fucking genius, because that makes a lot of sense. Obviously, they didn't bring up how they ditched the cape soon after, but in the moment, for the one or two times that he did use it, it was a cool idea. It was apparently Jim Ross's idea, Kane said, for one of Kane's eyes to be different. He would wear a contact lens in one of his eyes, the blue eye. I don't know if he still does that now. I'm not sure. I don't think so. But he did have that for a long time, where one of his eyes would be a different color. And that was a Jim Ross idea, which is kind of cool. So then they talk about the mask. And they had trouble making the masks because it wasn't your typical, just kind of put it on your face, whatever. It was form-fitted, I guess Kane said. So they really had to go out of their way to make these things, to make the things, to create these masks. So apparently, the wardrobe department had them made from an S&M store, which is hilarious. And because it was hard to find other people to make these masks. The issue with the masks, Kane said, and he had a whole lot of them, was that they were made of leather. So as a result, over time, they lost their shape. And Austin said, how many masks would you typically go through? And he said, 4 or 5, or rather one would last 4 or 5 months. So that's not a long time. And then he would always have a good one, a nice fresh one for TV. But the house shows and shit, he would go through those things like, not like candy, but like 4 or 5 months isn't a long time, but he would always have multiple masks going. And over 5 years, that shit adds up. Just because it was made of leather and it would lose its shape after a while. He also talked about how he would spend a half an hour after his matches getting his hair untangled, because that was back when he had the long locks and he had the mask on, and it was always tangled underneath the mask, and he had to do weird things with it and start cutting his hair and shit, because at that point with the long hair it just didn't work, and he would smell. It was a whole fucking process, he said. But while wearing the mask, one process that he kind of had to go through was over-exaggerating his facial expressions, because the mask hides your face, but you could still see his eyes, you could still see his mouth. I mean, not initially, but later on you did. So we always had to over-exaggerate, whereas if you're not wearing a mask, even the slightest fucking blink, you would notice. But with a mask, you don't really notice that type of stuff. So you had to make up for the mask being on your face by over-exaggerating your facial expressions, which makes a lot of sense. He learned body language through the Kane character, because again, he didn't have those facial expressions, that same freedom that other people did, because he was wearing a mask. So he had to kind of make up for that with body language. And this is fascinating. He actually learned the head tilt. He learned the head tilt that the Kane character was known for early on from his Saint Bernard, from his dog. He learned that head tilt from, and Bruce Pritchard even told him, listen, guy, you just told more of a story with that one head tilt than you could have in a 20-minute promo. And it worked. It just worked. And it also worked because at first he was mimicking Taker. So it made him really easy for him to do stuff, because he was just doing the opposite of whatever The Undertaker did. And as a result, over time, things became more natural for him when he adapted and identified and established his own moveset, He recalls the story of his debut. And we kind of already heard this story on the Untold thing a couple months ago, but it's still worth rehearing because it's great. But anyway, so he talks about how the day of the show at Bad Blood, it was in St. Louis, and obviously he's from St. Louis, so I think he was staying with family or friends or something like that. And they were going to drive him to the arena. He wasn't with the rest of the crew. He came in with his friend, and then his friend's car broke down on the way to the arena, so he's freaking out. This is like the biggest day of his life, and he's freaking the fuck out. Thankfully, his friend's friend picked him up, drove him to the arena, and it worked out just fine. But he was freaking out beforehand, though. So they rewatched the debut. Kane said that he never heard the music before, which, again, he mentioned on the Untold thing a few months ago. He had never heard the music before he debuted in that moment, which is really cool. And he loved that theme song. The first version of that character, he said, that incarnation of Kane is his downright favorite, like not even close. The crowd's silence that night was perfect. He praised The Undertaker's facial expressions and how masterful they were, and the crowd being silent wasn't a bad thing. Their silence spoke volumes, because it showed how shocked they were, and they were like, what the fuck is going on? In like the most perfect way possible. And Kane even said, it was done as well as it possibly could have been done. He realized after a conversation with Taker soon after that kind of realized the reason why he was there, why he was doing what he was doing. They also transitioned into the Inferno match that they had in April, I want to say, of 1998 at the Unforgiven pay-per-view. I thought it was Backlash, but I don't think Backlash came around until later on, until like 99. So yeah, it was Unforgiven. He said that, or rather, they talk about that in a second, but before, I'm reading into my notes a little too much here. Again, this was another thing he mentioned in the Untold special a few months ago, but he mentioned how he would throw his hands up, like when he was on the steel steps outside of the ring. Or no, I'm sorry, that's Taker. When Kane's in the middle of the ring, he would throw his hands up and then down, and the fire would come out. It was the exact opposite of what Taker would do. I never realized that. Maybe that was like a well-known thing, a well-known fact that people knew. I never knew that before Kane mentioned it in that Untold episode a couple months ago. My mind was blown. I was like, that makes so much sense, and that's so fucking smart. And he's been doing that for years. He still does that now whenever he comes back. So Taker would put his hands up, and the lights would come back on, and all the lights would go out, the fire would go out, whatever. Kane, the lights would be on, he would take the lights off, and the fire would come up when his hands went down. It was so brilliant. I thought that was great. So anyway, like I said, they talk about the Inferno match. And he said that it was a whole process. Taker went through a lot in his time in WWE. Kane said he was fortunate, though one experience that comes to mind as being like hectic or like, oh God, this is going to be a nightmare, was for the Inferno match in April of 98, like I mentioned earlier. They were going to rehearse it the night before, because this is like professional stunt stuff with fire and stuff. Like, this isn't your typical wrestling match here. They were going to rehearse it. The rehearsal got canceled. They were running around all weekend. He was told that he could only move his arm in a certain way because his arm was going to be on fire. That's how he was going to lose the match, I guess. But he couldn't turn it this way because if he did, he would inhale the flames. There was so much to remember, and Kane was so nervous because this is something you practice over the course of a couple weeks, not nail on the spot the night of the event, But he called the match visually spectacular. He almost burned his hand by accident, though, after the match when he caught his hand on fire, then he ran to the back. His left hand accidentally touched, not the fire, but the burner, what creates the flames, which is basically like touching a hot stove. He no-sold the thing, but when you see the footage, you could see where his hand touched the burner on the side of the ring, and I can only imagine how painful that was. He said he had no scars or anything like that, but still, touching something like that's that hot, that's not going to be a very pleasant experience, to say the least. He said when they talk about the WrestleMania match, the month before at WrestleMania 14, Kane said his heart was racing out of his chest. Even Paul Bearer noticed it, just standing there right next to him, watching Taker's entrance. He was standing in the ring, watching his entrance. He was like, whoa, that's crazy. He called it truly awesome. Even Austin said he forgot everything they were going to do in a match one time because of Taker's entrance. He was so mesmerized. He was so, mesmerized, encapsulated. I forget that's not even a word, but you know what I'm saying. He was so entranced by the Undertaker's entrance. He forgot everything they were going to do in that match, which is nuts. Kane had said that WrestleMania match with the Undertaker really made Kane. It made him into a bona fide, solidified superstar. When he kicked out of not one, but 2 tombstones. He lost the match, but they really made Kane into a superstar. He said that Kane attacked him afterward. I don't remember that. I guess he must have. He wouldn't have made that up, but I don't remember that at all. I remember the match, just not that. But anyway, though, so the only person to kick out of a tombstone prior to that point, within the 8 years Taker was in WWE, was Hulk Hogan. And that was in 91 or something, when they had their feud when Taker first showed up in the company. He was the only person to kick out of a tombstone. No one prior to that point had ever kicked out of 2. I think that there's still a very elite list of people that have kicked out of not 1 but 2 tombstones. I know Brock Lesnar's on that list, probably Shawn Michaels, probably Triple H, I'd imagine. But it's very few and far between, let's put it that way. But anyway, he said that Taker was very important in his career, even long before he arrived in WWE, because he was probably the person who put in a good word for him when they worked that match in Smoky Mountain in 1995. Taker probably said, hey, this guy's got potential, sign him, and then they did soon after. Was it 95? I guess the match was in 95. Even though he was brought in that same year as Isaac Yankem? Well, that's weird. But I mean, it would make sense that Taker had a lot to do with him getting hired after the match they had at that point. He talked about how Taker told Kane, actually, after his Isaac Yankem thing, kind of burned up in flames, no pun intended, just to go out there and to show what you could do. The character sucked, but, try to make the most of it. Just go out there, make the most of it, and they will see how talented you truly are. And that's exactly what happened. Taker said that he went to, or Kane said that Taker went to his campaign last year, the year before, which is fucking cool. And he said, without The Undertaker, there would be no Kane, which is absolutely correct. I'm sure he would have still found success in another role, but there is no more perfect character for Kane in WWE than The Undertaker. I mean, I'm sorry, for Kane in WWE than the Kane character itself. That's how well he played that role. If you put anyone else in that position, it probably would have not as worked as well as it did. I'll tell you that much right now. He also talked to Taker about booking issues, problems and frustrations that he had with the booking back then that had nothing to do with Taker, but he kind of vented to him. Then he would talk to Vince, and Vince said he already talked to Taker about it, and he said, listen, Taker cares more about you than he does about himself. Taker always looked out for Kane, and it kind of warms my heart to hear that they're really good friends in real life. That's really cool. And that they kind of still keep in touch to this day, even when, they're not as close as they were, just because they're a lot older now, and they're not, Kane's not around anymore, Taker's not around anymore. But whenever Kane needs something or Taker needs something, they're always just one phone call away. So then they transition into the angle on Raw in mid-98 where Austin got blood poured all over him from the rafters, from the ceiling, whatever, by Kane, who was standing on the stage. Austin calls it one of his favorite angles he ever did. Kane breaks down the angle, what went into it. He said it was really cool to have stories intertwined at that point with Mick Foley and Taker himself and Stone Cold Steve Austin. Stone Cold said that his parents actually were in the crowd that night for his show to see him. Not for that one, I don't think. I think it was another show in Houston. This was in Austin, Texas. Not that night. He wrestled a match the following week with those guys, like a tag team match or something, and his parents were there, which is kind of cool. Probably the Hell in a Cell tag team match. Now that I think about it, I'm pretty sure that was on the go-home show for the 98 King of the Ring pay-per-view, if I'm not mistaken. But anyway, his mom was there. Kane said, he said that Austin, first of all, said that his parents had only been to maybe 2 or 3 of his matches in his entire career. When he first started out, that one show in WWE in 98, and that was about it. Kane had even said after Austin asked him, how many shows have your parents been to? And Kane said, at least, he didn't say more than one, but he did mention one. And the sign that Kane's mom brought to the show said, "I raised Kane," which is an amazing playoff of raising Kane. If you get the reference, you get the reference. But I thought that was such a great fucking sign. But anyway, so not after the blood pouring angle, but the following week, following the Hell in a Cell match, I think the pay-per-view must have been that weekend. I'm pretty sure it was the Hell in a Cell tag team match. But anyway, Austin said he got a staph infection. And he was in the hospital for 3.5 days after an injury suffered in the match. And they told these guys, listen, yeah, it was the same week of the pay-per-view. So he's like, listen, I got to go work a pay-per-view. I got to go work against this guy. I got to get out of here. They cleared him. He was good, whatever. He was off on his way. Kane jokes about how he's still hot at Foley even 2 decades later because he stole his thunder at the 1998 King of the Ring pay-per-view. Because at that pay-per-view, that was where they did Taker and Mick Foley inside Hell in a Cell. And on that same night, a lot of people forget, Kane won his first WWE Championship from Stone Cold Steve Austin in the main event. That Foley-Taker match was not the last match on that show. Rather, it was Kane and Austin in a First Blood match. He said he thought Mick Foley was dead. He was one of his traveling partners, and when he saw Mick Foley go through the cell, and he even says, I don't think he knows for sure, he said, but he did say that the first spot where Foley fell off the top of the cell, he got chucked off, was planned, obviously. Even Foley said that in the Untold thing about a year or 2 ago. But the spot where he got chokeslammed at the top of the cell through the cell, down to the mat below, was not planned. That was not supposed to break. That was completely an accident because the cell broke. And at least to Kane's knowledge, that's what happened. And he thought after Foley went through that cell, he thought he was dead. But he also found out after that match, because Foley was still set to get involved in the main event between Kane and Austin, Vince even told Kane and Austin, he was like, listen, if Foley can't go, you guys got to come up with a new finish on the spot. And they're like, what the fuck? They're freaking out. And they weren't sure what they were going to do until Foley came out at the end of the match. So had he not come out, who knows what would happen, if it would still be remembered as fondly as it is today. But Foley ended up coming out. God bless him. One of the toughest men in the history of this business. And they finished the match. So they talked about how Taker broke his ankle on a show in Houston. Probably that Hell in a Cell. Yeah, I think it was that Hell in a Cell match on Raw before the pay-per-view. And again, Taker already talked about this on the Untold thing about a year or 2 ago. So that's nothing new. But they ended up rewatching the First Blood match from the pay-per-view. Kane asked him, being a world champion's being a world champion. We're not belt mark, but, being a world champion's a cool thing. How did you feel about it? Kane says, listen, he was blown away by it. It wasn't something that he cried. It wasn't one of those things that he cried over, obviously. But it was a thing where he took it with a lot of pride. He took a lot of pride in that championship win at the King of the Ring 1998 pay-per-view. And he said that when he went back to his hotel that night, he had a twin bed, so he gave the other bed to his championship. That's so fucking funny. Just the sight of Kane sleeping in one bed and his championship sleeping in the other is so goddamn amazing. But anyway, so they talk about Paul Bearer, and Paul Bearer said that he made sure pictures were taken that night with Kane as the WWE champion because it would not last long. Paul Bearer made sure to make the most of the moment because he knew it was not going to last long the next night. Because a lot of fans expected, I guess, according to Kane, that Austin would retain and that would be it. No one expected Kane to win, and then he did, and then they kind of threw people for a loop, and they put the championship right back on Austin the very next night. And then Austin challenged Kane to a rematch the next night on Raw, and the whole kind of mindset behind that, according to Austin and Kane themselves, was that Kane wanted to prove that he could beat Stone Cold Steve Austin, because the night before, remember, he only won the championship because of The Undertaker. So he wanted to prove that he was superior to Stone Cold, that he could do it all on his own by beating Stone Cold in this rematch on Raw less than 24 hours later. Kane said in his book, he said again here, losing the championship right back to Austin was one of the favorite moments of his entire career. He said it was the most electric crowd I had ever been in front of that very next night on Raw from the King of the Ring pay-per-view. He loved the match. He loved the moment. He likes putting people over because it was never really in the plans for him to get a lengthy title run. He loved the fact that he was able to drop it right back to Austin. The crowd ate it up. They bought it. They were along for the ride, and they ate up everything they did in that match. And he's also very, gives a lot of praise because it was that angle that kind of kicked off the Brothers of Destruction, and that it was Stone Cold Steve Austin's character that really brought them together. They talk about that for a little bit. He said that, Kane says that it didn't matter if they were baby faces, it didn't matter if they were heels. People had always wanted to see them team more than they wanted them to feud, which is absolutely correct. And he said with that tag team, it was all about, staying unique and keeping that mystique going. So they talk about tag team matches, if you like being in tag team matches. Kane says he loves tag team matches even more than singles matches, depending on who his partner is. He was very lucky to have a lot of great partners throughout his entire career. Like I said, he said that he liked tag team matches better. He likes singles matches, but just singles matches. He believes he's of the mindset, which I completely agree. The whole triple threat, multi-man bullshit, it doesn't make any sense. A world championship match should be 1v1. That's it. No bullshit with multiple people. Sometimes when the time is right, but that's about it. More often than not, it should be a straight-up singles match. Give it a big fight feel. None of this multi-man bullshit. As it should be with every WrestleMania main event, as it should be with every World Championship match, which honestly is very much, a mindset that Triple H shares as well. I know this is kind of a side note, but I was thinking while he said that, and I've thought about this before, NXT very rarely does multi-man matches for the main championship. Now, I know they do it a lot for the tag titles, for the women's championship, they do it quite a bit. They actually had a multi-man match to determine the first ever North American champion, but for the NXT championship itself, I can't remember the last multi-man match they did over the NXT championship. They definitely did not do one this year. Don't think they did one last year. The year before. I just remember the 4-way from TakeOver Fatal 4-way over 5 years ago with Tyson Kidd, Neville, Tyler Breeze, and Sami Zayn. That's the only multi-man match that comes to mind. I'm sure they've done another one that I'm just not thinking of. But Triple H is of that same mindset that their biggest matches, that their main events should be 1v1. None of this multi-man bullshit. But anyway, going back to Kane's original point here. Let's see, I got lost in my notes. Where was I? He said that Austin also agrees that he loves tag team matches, but he hates it. The only con to having a tag team going is that when your partner gets hurt, the other person that's still healthy is fucked because they have nothing to do, like with Brian Pillman when Austin was teaming with him. That never really happened too much with Kane and Taker, but it's happened with a lot of tag teams before. It happens a lot. Like the Revival specifically a couple years ago. One got hurt, they came back, and then the other guy got hurt. It's like, what the fuck? Like, it sucks to be in a tag team sometimes for reasons like that. But then they talk about Paul Bearer and how important he was to Kane. Paul Bearer booked all the travel, and he only really wanted Kane to worry about his matches and nothing more. But he does recall an incident, Kane does, about one time Paul Bearer ribbed Kane, where they would drive everywhere, and I guess Kane must have been driving, and when they were out driving, Kane would wear a ski mask. Because, he wasn't going to wear his wrestling mask, he wasn't going to go out showing his face. So to keep kayfabe, he would drive around wearing a ski mask, which is quite the sight. If I saw someone wearing a ski mask in their car driving down the street, I would fucking turn around and drive the other way. I'm like, what bank are they going to? And hopefully it's not where I'm going right now, But it was it was a funny story because Paul Bearer just rolls down the window and he was like, "Oh, Kane can drive. It's a miracle. Kane can drive." And he was doing his Paul Bearer voice, and they were right outside of the arena, and people swarmed the car. Just a really funny moment. And Kane felt so embarrassed in that moment because of Paul Bearer. So a great story there. So then they transitioned into Kane taking his mask off in 2003. And Kane said that the whole idea behind it was that he wanted to reinvent himself. The mask got stale. He had it by that point for 6 years. He debuted with it in 97. He had it up until 2003. That's a long time. And he said, interestingly enough, him and Vince were the only two people who agreed to take the mask off of Kane. They were the only two people. That's nuts. Everyone else said, no, it's successful. If it ain't broken, why, don't fix it, whatever. Kane and Vince were the only ones that said, hey, listen, it's time to take it off. If Kane's saying that and it's his mask, I think a lot of people thought years ago, oh, it was a Vince call, what a dumb thing to do, it was stupid, blah, blah, blah. Kane brings up a great point, that it just gets stale after a while, So, that they had to switch it up somehow, and taking off the mask was the right route to take. Now, the aftermath wasn't the greatest. The Rob Van Dam feud was whatever. The Shane feud was actually quite great. I will give them that. The Taker feud the next year was and then he went right back to being a mid-carder after that. But still, taking the mask off for a little while really refreshed his character. But he will admit that he felt naked after first taking that mask off when RVD was there and he unmasked himself. That he felt naked for a little while not wearing that mask. Stone Cold even goes so far as to say that he thought Kane was scarier without the mask on. Not because he's ugly or anything, but just because he can really utilize his full facial expressions now and everything else. It just made him a hell of a lot more scarier. So if you can recall, they showed the footage here, but when Kane, he had long hair prior to that point. And when they took off the mask, they wanted him to have short hair, have half of his front head shaved bald, and then he would have hair in the second half of his head. It looked fucking ridiculous. If I didn't know this guy was a wrestler, I would think he's some psychotic hobo. It looked so dumb. But he said that he didn't tell his wife that he was going to shave his head because she loved the long hair. Because he wanted to keep it a surprise, for everyone else at home. And then he got a phone call after the show from her being pissed and how shocked she was and how disappointed and how sad and pissed she was because she didn't want him to shave his head. But anyway, with the whole head shaving thing on that note, actually, it was Bruce Pritchard's idea, for him to have a half head of hair. It just looks so ridiculous, though. And then he realized that initially, he realized, or no, he thought initially, hey, it's going to be kind of cool, this is a badass look. And then he thought to himself, after looking himself in the mirror, he goes, I'm going to have to look like this out in public when I go to Outback Steakhouse. I got to shave it off. This is so stupid. So no more than the next day, I think, he shaved his entire head off. Because it was Bruce Pritchard's idea for him to have the half head of hair, and he looked completely ridiculous. So Kane called Vince, he's like, no fam, I can't do this. So he just shaved his head himself, which is why he looked weird for so long. I thought that was a great story too. I'm sure I've heard that somewhere else before, but I thought it was great for him to retell that story here. But he also brings up too, that he finally got to let loose after taking the mask off. And it was unbridled rage, talking about the segment where he lit Jim Ross on fire. I don't know if it was the next week after he unmasked, but it was definitely soon after, where they were doing that sit-down segment, a lot like what Jim Ross did with Mick Foley, with Mankind, whatever, back in the late 90s. They kind of reenacted that with Jim Ross and Kane, where Kane literally lit Jim Ross on fire. How they pulled that off, I don't know. He probably had some sort of a suit on underneath. Still scary as hell. They didn't really go into that too much, but they talked about the segment. And Stone Cold kind of joked about how he had a bone to pick with Kane because, obviously Austin is very close with Jim Ross. So, anyway, he talked about how the mask thing and the fact that he took the mask off, and I thought this was brilliant. He said that people were flipping out, that the scars that he had he didn't have any scars. When he took the mask off, people were like, where are the scars? Why did he wear the mask for so long if he didn't have any scars to begin with? It wasn't the physical scars. It was the scars that he had mentally on the inside, which is such amazing rationale, but I don't think they ever once explained that in the ongoing TV show and whatever. I don't think they ever once said, oh yeah, that's why he wore the mask, because he was scarred on the inside. It had nothing to do with the scars that he had physically. That's such great storytelling. I thought that was brilliant. And he always wore a mask because he felt like he did. He wore a mask because he felt like he did have physical scars, even though they were always on the inside. I thought that was amazing attention to detail. They really should have delved into deeper when they first had him unmasked back in 2003. He always wondered why the Jim Ross character would agree to do the fucking sit-down interview, because he would sit down to interview him in the segment, and there's gasoline sitting right there. So, like, why would you agree to do this when you know the guy's psychotic? That never made sense to Kane. It definitely makes no sense in retrospect. But it was a great segment. People tend to forget about that. They then rewatched the anger management skit from 2012, and everyone that Kane knew, his entire family thought it was a classic. It was specifically the skit where he came into anger management, where Daniel Bryan was, and Kane ran down. They showed the whole clip where he was talking to Dr. Shelby in the circle at this anger management group, where Kane ran down his whole family history, like the Katie Vick thing, burning his parents, or his brother burning his parents, his history with The Undertaker, without saying any names, though, aside from Katie Vick, which was funny. How he was married, divorced, lit a priest on fire, his history with his father, Paul Bearer, all this other stuff. And the comedic timing, the delivery was so perfect. I remember loving that back then, and it's still amazing 8 years later. He said it was such a departure from the Kane character that it was so much fucking fun. And he never really understood, he never really felt burnt out prior to that point, but he did. He felt burnt out with the Kane character. He said the whole, menacing, evil guy, mask, no mask, whatever. There's only so many times you could do that. Put it on, take it off, whatever. That he just got bored. So he felt it was really time for him to show off his comedic side, which is why Team Hell No for him was so refreshing. And he really wanted to show people that there was more to him as a performer than just the menacing, scary stuff, that he could pull off comedy if he wanted to, and he did wonderfully. He called the whole thing awesome. He said he found out about the Pete Rose thing. They kind of delve into that a little bit before the show goes off the air, where he tombstoned Pete Rose right on his head at WrestleMania 14, that he found out about that the day of the event. And he said that if Pete Rose didn't have the Hall of Fame career that he did in baseball, he would have been a great heel in professional wrestling. Because he was so great in that moment, going off in the Boston crowd at 14 before getting his fucking comeuppance in the form of a tombstone by The Undertaker. But he said that, they went on to do it another 2 times at WrestleMania 15, then again at WrestleMania 2000, and 2 years after the original skit between the two. He said that Pete Rose actually gave him the baseball bat, and he signed it for him and everything that he had tried to hit Kane with on that show, which is fascinating. To have a baseball bat signed by Pete Rose, that's fucking cool. And then obviously Pete Rose was inducted into the Hall of Fame in 2004, or not 2004, 2010, excuse me. No, wait, it was 2004. He guest hosted Raw in 2010. I don't know if Kane did the induction. It wouldn't make sense. I don't remember in retrospect. I know Pete Rose went in fairly early, though, in the celebrity wing. He might have been the first celebrity inducted, now that I think about it. But anyway, to wrap this thing off, to ride off into the sunset, Stone Cold asks Kane, how long do you think you can continue to wrestle? How long do you think you have left in the wrestling business? How long do you think you'll plan to wrestle for? Kane says he doesn't know. He's still having fun. He's done a few things recently, like win the 24/7 championship as Glenn Jacobs on Raw a couple months ago. He got to face DX in a dream match, he says. And yeah, it was a dream match 20 years ago. And he literally says if that opportunity ever presented itself again, he would love to do it. So he's saying if there's a rematch, God, no thank you. Triple H and Shawn versus Team Hell No the first time, not Team Hell No, the Brothers of Destruction, was fucking terrible. Kane didn't look too bad. He lost his mask, which was embarrassing. The whole match, though, sucked. They obviously neglected to mention that. The whole match was terrible. That thing was such a disaster. So I wasn't a big fan of the fact that he said that here. But other than that, I thought this was great. And they closed it out with Austin saying, then they kind of wrap up his career and they, sum up his career in a couple sentences. And Kane even says that he's been blessed to never have any major injuries throughout his entire career. He's been banged up and beat up and stuff, but you never really hear much, even nowadays. I know he hasn't wrestled regularly in a while, but Kane, you don't really hear too much about him and how he's injured. Usually, if anything, it's something minor. And for a guy that's been in the business for over 20 years, that's saying a lot. So I think that's pretty fucking cool. But anyway, that was the note they ended on. They kind of ride off into the sunset, and that's it. I thought this was a tremendous piece of business. A lot of fun here. Kane and Stone Cold have tremendous chemistry. And like I said earlier, they didn't even scratch the surface. Obviously, they got all the Taker stuff, the pre-WWE stuff, the Team Hell No stuff, which was cool. But there's so much more they could have talked about. The Katie Vick thing, how the fuck do you not ask about Katie Vick? Maybe they didn't cut it out from the network version, I don't know. But like with Kane, a lot like with Taker, there's so much more they can get into because he's been with WWE now for so long. You know, I know he didn't do a lot in the mid-2000s, like when he was on SmackDown and feuding with fucking MVP. Like, they're not going to talk about that, obviously, but still, there's a lot more they could have talked about putting the mask back on. The Katie Vick thing, which I would love to know his thoughts on that terrible, terrible, terrible storyline. He asked when he would be retiring and obviously gave the obvious answer there, like, oh, I don't know yet, which is true. He wrestles every once in a while. He hasn't wrestled a formal match since Crown Jewel over a year ago, but that doesn't mean he won't wrestle again. And that's really about it. They kind of covered everything else, which is kind of cool. But, people might be disappointed, oh, he didn't talk about this or that and whatever, like his 2003, tag team with fucking this guy or that guy, like his team with Booker T. They could have talked about the tag team with Booker T, or the team with X-Pac, or, they had the Taker and Kane feud rekindled in 2004 and again in 2010, his reign as World Heavyweight Champion, his thoughts on that, his thoughts on the current roster. Kane comes across like such a nice guy that he wouldn't bury anyone. He didn't bury anyone, which was cool. But I would love to hear more from him, and I'm looking forward to reading his book at some point, hopefully reviewing it here for the channel. But yeah, be sure to check this out on the network. It's absolutely must-see. Well worth the hour and 19 minutes that it is on the WWE Network. Broken Skull Sessions with the Big Red Monster, the mayor of Knoxville, Tennessee, Kane. Awesome stuff here. So thank you guys, as always, for checking out my review of the Broken Skull Sessions with The Undertaker's brother, Kane. I'm still mixed up on The Undertaker episode from a couple months ago. I love these as a regular occurrence on the network. They really got to make this a monthly thing. So far, they have. They did one after Survivor Series, one after TLC, and then one after the NXT UK TakeOver Blackpool 2 show on Sunday. It would be cool if they did another one right after the Elimination Chamber pay-per-view in February, fingers crossed. This is easily, like far and away, aside from 24, the best show on the network right now. And they have a lot of good shows. I enjoy Table for Three and Ride-Alongs, whatever. It's not really, noteworthy, but it's fine. It's a good show. Untold's a great show. And, I think this, though, is really informative. It's a lot of fun to just see these two legends sit down and shoot the shit. And so far, it's, a lot of the people that Stone Cold Steve Austin broke into the business with, people like Goldberg. And, he didn't really work with them early on, but they grew up in the same era. They came up in the same era. So hopefully at some point he gets some more people on from, recent years. But hopefully they can continue the trend of bringing on big names. Because they did that initially with the Stone Cold podcast 5-6 years ago. And it was hot out of the gate with people like Vince and Triple H. And then they started having people like Paige on. Like, who gives a fuck? No disrespect to Paige, but like, I know that was probably an audible because they were supposed to have Hogan on. They had Hogan and Austin's podcast earlier last year, and it was a lot of bullshit. I mean, because Hogan tells a lot of tall tales. Sting would be another good guest. There's a lot of people they could do from that era. A lot of big names. Shawn Michaels would be cool. I think he and Shawn actually had a podcast the last time, so maybe not. But people like Kane and Taker, people that we don't really hear from in this setting all the time. So I really enjoy stuff like this. This was really, really good. But anyway, guys, be sure to like this video, drop a comment, share the video, and subscribe to the channel for more content. I think there's, this is going up. This went up on Sunday, this Broken Skull Sessions episode. Don't know what's airing after Raw tonight as I record this. Probably nothing. So whenever something new airs on the network, whether it be a special or whatever, something like this, I will be breaking it down. And when new episodes of Miz and Mrs. return later on in the month, you can damn sure expect I'll be breaking those down too right here on Network and Chill. So on that note, guys, have a great rest of your week. I'm Graham Giason Matthews, and I'll catch your ass down the road.